going to be reading from this book, The Critical Review or Annals of Literature, Volume 57, Tobias George Smollett. Now we're on page 140. Pope Nicholas V, in that famous bull by which he granted the unknown world to the Portuguese and Spaniards, expressly permitted and ordered the Christians to reduce all infidels into slavery. Okay, so basically the king, if the king was a Christian, all his subjects had to be of that same religion. That's how it was. So you had the black, quote unquote, Jews or Judeans or Moors that were into Islam at that time did not convert to Christianity. They were expelled. Okay. An order zealously executed by both these nations. In the meanwhile, the Portuguese were advancing nearer and nearer to the countries abounding in gold, and discovered in the progress of their navigation many useful and valuable articles of trade. That of pepper, now found by them, gave the first stock to the East Indian trade. Bear with me, some of these words are kind of hard to make out. Till then carried on by the Vatnians. In order to procure plenty of pepper, a spice of which incredible quantities were consumed in those ages. Okay, right here. Professor Springle divides the history of the Negro trade carried on by Christians. This is why a lot of people nowadays, when they find out about Christianity and so forth, why are you in that pagan religion or Babylonian Kemetic mystery religion? Christianity has nothing to do with the Bible. You can check on my page about the two Babylons and many other books to attest that Christianity has nothing to do with the biblical scriptures. It's a man-made religion. Christ did not set up Christianity on earth. Reading on into two principal periods, the first from 1443 to 1645, and the second from 1645 to the present times. The first period is the time of its increase, during which not only its founders, the Portuguese, but the English, the Dutch, and the French dealt in Negro slaves, though chiefly for the youth and consumption of the Spaniards in the sugar and tobacco plantations in the Brazils. Okay. Right here, Swedes, the Danes, and Brandenburgers, the North Americans, and since 1778 with the Spaniards. The trade, however, still increased not only by the Swedes and Brandenburgers sealing their navigations to the coast of Guinea, but from the annual demand of a supply of more than 100,000 Negroes recruits for their own colonies. The author confines his relation of the first Negro trade to that carried on by the Portuguese and Spaniards. Okay. Right here, Gonzalez was the first Portuguese who in 1442 returned with Negro slaves purchased instead of the Africans. So there's a difference between the Negro and the African, okay? But let's look that up in the Bible, Zondervan's Compact Bible Dictionary. So we're at the Zondervan's, page 213, Ham. The youngest son of Noah, born probably about 96 years before the flood, and one of the 8 persons to live through the flood. He became the progenitor of the dark races, not the Negroes, but the Egyptians, Ethiopians, aka the Cushites, Libyans, and the Canaanites. Genesis 10:6 through 20. So these people or these scholars will let you know there's a difference between a quote-unquote African and a Negro. The Negro is of Shem, the stock of Shem. Okay. Let's see. Reading on. Who had still then had been carried off by more violence. But soon after the Portuguese became better acquainted with the African regions and their valuable productions, Prince Henry founded the first Guinea Company and settled factories in the portages of Argentina, if I'm pronouncing it right, and got the exclusive privilege of trading with the Arabs. The trade soon increased to that in 1455, not less than 700 or 800 Negro slaves were annually exported to Libyan. At length, the Portuguese in 1471 discovered the Gold Coast. Okay. So right here, I highlighted European navigators. So right here, of course, in my house, we have Negro land. Okay. Negro land, Upper Guinea, I pronounced that right, European settlements, England, Denmark, Holland, and so forth, by Emmanuel Bowen. Okay. What do we have right here? Kingdom of Judah, or Wida, Slave Coast. So these were Hebrewic kingdoms in West Africa. Okay. So that ties along with this book right here, Hebraisms of West Africa, or the Gold Coast. Right here, Gold Coast. Okay. And of course, where did they deport the black Jews or Negroes to? The island of St. Thomas. Okay. So after 70 AD, once Rome destroyed Jerusalem, you had a lot of Israelites or Hebrewic people from the southern kingdom, established settlements all around Africa, especially the western parts. So now we're going to be looking at this book again, Hebraisms of West Africa. We're also going to look at this book as well, by Rudolph R. Windsor, The Valley of Dry Bones, the conditions that face so-called black people in America. But first, this book right here, Hebraisms of West Africa, page 167, The Line of the Tribe of Judah. By 2 routes, Hebraic culture may have penetrated to West Africa, from the north across the desert waste, and from the east along the general line of traffic that skirts the great tropical forest. Possibility of its introduction by sea is so remote that it may, for the present at least, be disregarded. That Hebraic influence did penetrate to the very heart of Negro land by both routes indicated. Okay. So once again, they knew who they were. So now we're going to look at this book. As you can see right here, we have another map. All names and arrows represent previous Hebrew settlements, some of still which exist today, from Israel to Niger or Niger, and from Portugal to Africa. As we can see, same area. And we have St. Thomas. Okay. 1492, I believe, the black Jews of Spain. Of course, they didn't convert to Christianity, so they were sent down here as slaves or whatnot. Okay. Okay. The Bible is an African book. Black people wrote the Bible, and they wrote it primarily about themselves. Okay. So this is the author in his statement that the Bible is talking about who? The children of Israel. Okay, back to this book, Hebrewisms. The present Philosophy of Abyssinia, since today they constitute by far the largest and most influential individual group in Africa, which has distinctively Jewish or Judean descent. Next in order, we shall search out the origin of those Jewish colonies that have clustered along the southern shore of the Mediterranean almost from time immemorial, and have unquestionably had at least commercial contact with the interior of the dark continent. Finally, we propose to trace the historical relation between the Jews in Egypt and the far-reaching consequences produced by the steady advance of Hebraic cultural influence up to the Nile and into the heart of Africa. So right here, page 7, Ashanti influence on Jamaican customs. A lot of those people out there are people as well. I know they have this diaspora war that's going on, but when we look at the biblical history of our people, we all are one and the same. I'm not talking about Hamites though. So right here, African slaves. W.J. Gardner, in his History of Jamaica, states great numbers of Negro slaves were imported from Africa, representing tribes as diverse in character as different European nations. Among these, the fierce Quartermans occupied a very prominent place, but though their dangerous character was so well known, their superior strength was so highly valued as to lead to the rejection of all measures proposed to check their importation. Later on, the same author, while describing the various classes of slaves, tells us the Negroes from the Gold Coast were known generally as Quartermans, the Ashantis and the Fans described by Chalu were included in this term. They were strong and active, and on this account valued by the planters. The Spanish and the French colonists shunned them on the account of their ferocious tendencies, but attempts to prohibit their importation to Jamaica failed, though they were the instigators and leaders of every rebellion. So our people were not docile. Okay. Brian Edwards, a historian for many years, a resident of Jamaica and a member of the council, furnishes us with the most authentic description of these Kettleman slaves, as a appreciation of their characteristic traits will help to clarify what follows. A somewhat lengthy quotation from his graphic account may be pardoned. Speaking from his personal observation, he says, the circumstances which distinguish the Quartermans or Gold Coast Negroes from all others are firmness both of the body and mind, a ferociousness of disposition, but withal activity, courage, and a stubbornness, or what an ancient Roman would have deemed a elevation of soul, which prompts them to enterprises of difficulty and danger. Okay, so right here, we'll start right here. Prince Henry's colonies were enlarged by his successors. King John II in 1492, keyword 1492, expelled all the Jews, meaning what? The Judeans, to the island of St. Thomas. Okay, the island of St. Thomas, the Black Judeans, or the Israelites, okay? Which had been discovered in 1471 into other Portuguese settlements on the continent of Africa. And from there, banished Judeans or Jews, the Black Portuguese, as they are called, and the Jews in Lango, who are depicted even by the very Negroes are defended or descended. And you know that the Jew or Judean, Negro are synonymous, okay, with the wordplay. By their colonist, St. Thomas soon became a considerable place of trade and valuable for its sugar plantations. 30 years after their settlement, not less than 156,000 arobes of 30 pounds weight each of sugar were exported, and the engines of 50 sugar works turned by slaves. Their Negroes were purchased in Guinea, Congo, and Manicongo, and the colonists had plantations flourish with from 150 to 3,000 Negro slaves, meaning what? Jews or Judeans. In the beginning of the 16th century, the Spaniards and Portuguese began to transport Negroes to familiar labors to the West Indies and Brazils, by which the Negro trade was rapidly increased. The Spaniards, on their first settling in the West Indies, immediately treated the natives of that part of the globe according to the Pope's instruction. They divided them by families or districts among themselves as slaves. The poor Indians were now forced to dive for pearls, to wash gold lands, and to work gold and silver mines for their new masters or new makers. Okay. Now we're going to look at this book, Creole, New Orleans, Race and Americanization. Okay. Just to cross-reference. Okay. Now you know that these were Israelites or Judeans. Let's see if I can find. And this right here is a college textbook, by the way. Okay. So the ones in the know who actually study U.S. history know this is true. Table 1. Origins and numbers of slaves brought to Louisiana from Africa, 1719 through 1743. Place of origin, Judah or Wida. Year landed, 1719, 1720, 1721, 1728. Number of slaves, 200, 250, 182, 349, 303, and 464. Doesn't look like the millions, does it? Okay. Judah or Wida, as we just seen on the map. The kingdom of Judah or Wida, the slave coast. Okay. Kumbaya, my Lord. Right? Negro spiritual songs. Right here. The Portuguese, let's start right here. The English had taken Cambodia, and the English and the Portuguese dominated the entire coast of Angola. The French had little hope of trading in Angola except with great difficulty. Although the Company of Indies had a trading post at Judah, Judah, Gulf of Benin, there it competed with all the nations of Europe. The Portuguese were taking the upper hand at Judah. The kings of Ardres or Alada or Porto Nova were hostile to the Europeans and interrupting trade. The slave trade at Judah was becoming uncertain and unprofitable. Between 1726 and 1731, almost all the slave trading voyages organized by the Company of the Indies went to Louisiana. This is why you have the logo of the saints, and we know who the saints are according to Scripture. The Israelites, okay? All 12 tribes. This is why they have that logo on the New Orleans Saints football team, subliminally letting you know who the real saints are. Those Negroes that are running up and down that football field, unbeknownst to them. The most important kingdoms of Senegambia maintained a tight control over which peoples could be enslaved and sold to the Europeans. I repeat, the most important kingdoms of Senegambia maintained a tight control over which peoples could be enslaved and sold to the Europeans. Okay, so they were selling Judeans. Okay. Right here. There was only a handful of black slaves in Louisiana before the first slave trading ship arrived from Africa in 1719. So there were a lot of Aboriginal tribes already in the quote-unquote state of Louisiana. Okay. They didn't bring millions to that one state. The year after New Orleans was founded, between 1719 and 1731, 22 of the 23 slave trading ships that came from Africa while France ruled Louisiana arrived. Between June 1719 and January 1731, 16 slave trading ships arrived in Louisiana from the Senegal region. 6 ships came from Judah, Wida, a slave trading post on the Gulf of Benin near Dahomey, and 1 from Cambodi, Angola, during the same period. The slave trade from Senegal intensified after 1725. Between February 1726 and January 1731, 12 slave ships from Senegal landed 3,259 slaves at Belize at the mouth of the Mississippi River. During the same period, 1 ship from Judah landed 464 slaves at the same port. Okay. Right here. The Africans, meaning what? The African Negroes or slaves brought to the Chesapeake during the 18th century came mainly from the Bight of Biafra and were heavily Ibo. Okay, heavily Ibo, meaning what? They were Israelites or Hebrewic people. So now we have another source, Ibo's Hebrew exiles from Israel. Okay, amazing facts and revelations. One of many pieces to the pie. Jewish origin of the Ibos, perspective from history and divine revelation. The first British explorers who met Ibos of Nigeria were quick to identify them as a branch of Hebrews, 1938, and so simply refer to them as Hebrews, Hebos, Ebos, or in later Ibos. During the time of the first documentation of the history of the Ibos, the early Ibos, who knew very little or no English, following the pronunciation of the new version of their original name by the colonial masters, deviated from the name Ivit, as in Ivit, from Ivrit, okay, and began to use the popular new and foreign language of the colonists, and so also referred to themselves as Hebo, a corruption of Hebrew, or accepted to be called Hebo, Ebo, or Ibo as a way of associating themselves with the emergent new culture of the colonial master. Okay. Now there's a book also, Equiano, who was an Igbo or Israelite or Hebrewic man. Right here, the striking similarities that Basin observed made him to conclude that the Ibos are a branch of Hebrews, and that any European wishing to effectively deal with them should first of all go and acquaint himself with Mosaic laws. Okay? Right here, we practice circumcision like the Jews, meaning what? The Judeans, and made offerings and feasts on the occasion in the same manner as they did. Like them, also our children were named after some event, some circumcised or fancied foreboding at the time of their birth. Again, the Ibo, like the Jews or Judeans, according to Ecleano, are almost a nation of dancers, musicians, and poetry, meaning what? Rappers. Thus, every great event, such as a triumphant return from battle rap, or other cause of public rejoicing, is celebrated in public dances, which are accompanied with songs and music suited to the occasion. Okay? So now we're going to be reading from this book, From Babylon to Timbuktu 2, The History of the Ancient Black Races, including the Black Hebrews, Rudolph R. Windsor. So right here, in the year 65 BC, the Roman armies under General Pompey captured Jerusalem. In 70 AD, General Vespasian and his son Titus put an end to the Jewish or Judean state with great slaughter. During the period of the military governors of Palestine, many outrages and atrocities were committed against the residue of the people. During the period from Pompey to Julius, it has been estimated that over 1 million Judeans fled into Africa, fleeing from Roman persecution and slavery. These slave markets were full of black, Jewish, or Judean slaves. Okay? Deuteronomy 28 and 64. And the Lord Yahweh shall scatter thee among all people from the one end of the earth even unto the other, and there thou shalt serve other gods, which neither thou nor thy fathers have known, even wood and stone. This prophecy and all the residue of the prophecies contained in Deuteronomy 28:15 through 68 befell the black Judeans after they disobeyed the laws of the Most High. Many nations transported the Judeans into slavery, and the sons of Israel transmigrated to every continent. So this is why they became the Aztecs, the Olmecs, the certain Aboriginal tribes in the America, the Seminoles, the Cherokee, okay, the Washita. Then you had the Black Moors, or a lot of the royal bloodline families, the United Kingdom, okay, the land of the covenant. You had the Irish, the Black Scots, and so forth, the original Anglo-Saxons. They knew who they were.